Welcome, bienvenidos a todos. Muchísimas gracias por estar aquí. Debo agradecer a todos ustedes que están aquí. Tengo que agradecer a todo Panamá por la donación de este streaming que nos están dando, obviamente a Ciudad del Saber, a la Embajada de los Estados Unidos y a nuestra invitada hoy, Marcy Herr, que algunos de ustedes ya la conocieron esta mañana, en estos días, quien es la representante de la Universidad de Nueva York en Abu Dhabi. Hoy tenemos el gusto de estar con ustedes y vamos a hablar acerca de cómo aplicar a universidades en los Estados Unidos. Primero vamos a hablar un poquito de qué es Education USA. Ya muchos de ustedes nos conocen, pero a lo mejor los que nos están viendo por las redes o por YouTube no. Así que les recordamos que Education USA es un programa del Departamento de Estado de los Estados Unidos. Es una red global de centros de asesoría. Estamos en más de 175 países y representamos a más de 4.600 universidades acreditadas de los Estados Unidos. Panamá no tenía asesor hasta 3 años antes de la pandemia e inicié esta posición en la pandemia, así que muchos de los eventos que ustedes han visto, los han visto de manera virtual. Si no los pudieron ver, quedan grabados en nuestra página de Facebook y son recursos que hemos tratado de hacer estos 2 años virtualmente para poder llegar a todos los estudiantes a nivel nacional. Y ahora que tenemos nuestro centro, vamos a seguir haciendo este tipo de eventos, ahora de manera híbrida, para seguir llegándole a esos estudiantes que nos visitan desde Chiriquí, desde Azuero, desde los Estados Unidos que están viendo para maestrías o desde la comodidad de su casa. Pero lo que sí necesitamos es acceso, ¿right? Que la información les llegue a todos. Education USA funciona con 5 pasos para estudiar en Estados Unidos, los cuales vamos a repasar más adelante. Como les comenté, existen 4.700 universidades acreditadas en los Estados Unidos. Hay muchísima variedad, pero aquí en Panamá a veces nada más conocemos el nombre de 2 o 3. Entonces, por eso es que hacemos este tipo de eventos, para expandirles la mente y vean diferentes opciones, porque la educación internacional es sumamente importante. ¿Por qué existe Education USA? Como les comenté, es una red. Aquí están nuestras redes sociales y nos especializamos en todo lo que es educación superior en los Estados Unidos. ¿Pero por qué estudiar en Estados Unidos? Estados Unidos sigue siendo el país que tiene instituciones de clase mundial por la diversidad que existe, y la diversidad me refiero a que cuando ustedes estudian en Estados Unidos, conocen estudiantes de todo el mundo. Y esa es la riqueza. Los profesores vienen de todo el mundo porque las universidades y los laboratorios todavía siguen atrayendo a los mejores mentes del mundo. Muy diverso, mucha diversidad. Marcy va a hablar de eso, how diverse the US education is. El intercambio cultural y también la cercanía geográfica. Y aunque pensamos en Estados Unidos, hoy estamos entendiendo que también hay universidades con sedes en otras regiones donde tienen la oportunidad también de tener esa experiencia más internacional. Entonces, ¿qué hacemos? Trabajamos con 5 pasos y nuevamente yo les voy a hacer solamente un resumen general, una introducción, porque hoy nos vamos a enfocar en nuestra invitada que vino, de hecho, desde México para hacerle esta presentación de la Universidad de Nueva York. Entonces, ¿qué nos enfocamos nosotros? En 5 pasos. El primero es buscar e investigar opciones. ¿Opciones? ¿Qué queremos decir con opciones? Muchos de ustedes están por graduarse y están pensando, no estoy seguro qué quiero estudiar, qué carrera quiero. Yo siempre hablo de qué problema quiero resolver. Esta generación de ustedes van a tener muchos problemas que resolver a nivel global. Temas de agua, temas de ambiente, temas de carros eléctricos, temas hay un número de carreras que no existían, opciones de de especialización que no existían antes. Entonces, en Estados Unidos, universidades de Estados Unidos, podemos ver, por ejemplo, que pueden tomar una licenciatura en arte, una licenciatura en psicología y después el minor en arte y hacer algo interesante que mezcle arte terapia o equinoterapia. O puedes hacer negocios internacionales y agarrar un minor en otra carrera que te gusta. Entonces, esa flexibilidad es lo que les va a ayudar a ustedes a tener más skills, ¿no? Más herramientas. Entonces, van a buscar opciones. Y en la búsqueda de opciones también estamos hablando de entre las 4.600 universidades, cuáles son las mejores para mí. Si son las universidades grandes, las chiquitas, las públicas, las privadas. El Step 2 hablamos de cómo financiar los estudios. Hoy nos vamos a enfocar en uno, porque Marcy nos va a hablar de cómo aplicar, pero también vamos a ver estas opciones. Y también nos va a hablar de los requisitos también para financiar estudios, pero vamos a tener otras sesiones que son específicamente basadas en este tema de financiamiento y beca. Y hoy nos vamos a enfocar precisamente en el Step 3, que es el proceso de aplicación. El proceso de aplicación incluye una plataforma que ahorita es mucho más fácil que cuando nosotros fuimos a la universidad, porque tienes un solo app, es como Amazon, o para los que nos escuchan, o sea, es un solo lugar donde puedes ver, ok, cuál es el precio, cuál es el tamaño, cómo aplico, y qué es lo que me pide cada uno, si me piden cartas de recomendación, si me piden... Y eso es lo que vamos a hacer hoy con esta presentación de Marcy, ayudarlos con el Step 3, que es cómo hacer ese proceso de aplicación. En términos de solicitar la visa estudiantil, no nos enfocamos tanto en la aprobación de tal visa, sino más bien en prepararlos para que tengan los documentos para la visa estudiantil y también para prepararlos para que puedan viajar. Entonces, lo que hacemos es ayudarlos con el tema de investigar las opciones. Hay muchos recursos que tenemos en Education USA para ayudarlos a ir enfocando en diferentes opciones, diferentes oportunidades, ir aterrizando esa lista de las universidades que vamos entonces a incluir en ese Common App. Y si necesitamos un ensayo, ¿qué es lo que necesitamos incluir en ese ensayo? Entonces, estos recursos se los dejo aquí disponibles. Recuerden todos los recursos de becas, las becas que están abiertas ahorita mismo, como la de Walton, que está abierta. Hay becas para maestrías que están abiertas, hay oportunidades con la Embajada de Estados Unidos que están abiertas. Las tratamos siempre de tener actualizada en la página de Instagram. Entonces, si hay algo que deben saber aquí, síganos en Instagram y sigan el perfil para que se enteren cuando tenemos eventos aquí, para que se enteren con tiempo cuando tenemos oportunidades de financiamiento. Y también tenemos eventos regionales para ayudarnos a ir preparándonos para esto. Todo lo que es diferentes sesiones. En septiembre tenemos estas sesiones, luego en octubre tenemos otras sesiones. Todos estos recursos están disponibles virtualmente y gratuitamente en nuestra página web. Sí les quiero comentar, antes de cerrar, que así como tenemos este primer evento híbrido en el centro con NYU Abu Dhabi, vamos a tener también un evento con la Universidad de Florida la otra semana, con el programa de maestrías y doctorado, y 3 ex becarios de diferentes programas que están haciendo investigación en temas de oceanografía, en temas muy interesantes de historia y en temas de derecho. Entonces, como para que tengan esa visión, también vamos a tener eso la próxima semana. Luego vamos a tener la Universidad de Florida el 5 de octubre y el 10 de octubre vamos a tener un número de otras universidades aquí y el 20 de octubre también otras actividades. Así que vamos a estar, hoy digo que es como, hoy es el principio de una serie de actividades que queremos que esperemos que puedan participar, y la vamos a hacer híbrida también para que tengan esa opción. Así que muchísimas gracias y sin más, ahora sí entramos en materia, así que espero que hayan traído algo con que apuntar, porque los recursos y la información que nos va a dar Marcy va a ser sumamente valiosa e importante. Muchísimas gracias y cualquier pregunta al final de la sesión. Marcy, all yours.
Y mil disculpa, pero ahorita vamos a continuar en inglés. So, like Gladys said, my name is Marcy, and I'm so happy to meet all of you, and I'm thrilled that you're here today, because it's my job not only to talk about New York University's campus in Abu Dhabi, but also to support students through the application process. And so that's really what we'll focus on today, is just what it's like to apply to U.S. universities, what's expected of you, and some tips and tricks. I am originally from Pennsylvania. I went to university in Pennsylvania that we'll talk about a little bit as an example. But since my graduation, I've lived in Malaysia, Thailand, and now Mexico, just to connect with students like yourselves and to help you with this process. My presentation is going to be in a couple parts, and I recognize and really appreciate your participation as much as possible. First, I'm going to be speaking about holistic admissions and what universities are looking for in your applications. We'll talk a little bit about that process. We'll focus on the common application, also the common application essay, and at the end, time permitting, I'll show you a little video about NYU's campus in Abu Dhabi. So just to start off, universities like NYU all throughout the United States and other countries as well, but mostly in the US, are focused on holistic admissions. We're not only expecting academic excellence anymore, there's more to it than that. We want to see the whole student, the complete application, and that includes the things that you see here. What activities are you involved in? Letters of recommendation from teachers who know you really well, so we can get to know you at least as well as possible through your application. Your essays, and then also your student fit. It looks a little bit like this Venn diagram. All of those components of your application combined are how decisions are made. It's not one thing that's the most important. And as we go into the Common Application website, you'll see how we are receiving all of these items from students and from you, how you are submitting those different things. I think this really sums it up quite well, that it's academics, your extracurriculars, and then you personally. Those three things are the items that we are weighing when we review applications. And before we go on and look at the common application itself, I want to just explain a little bit more what we mean by student fit. So I have a list here of terms that when we are reviewing applications for NYU Abu Dhabi, these are some things that we have identified that we are looking for in applicants. Not necessarily all of them, but for our university and for what makes us a unique and diverse place, these are some things that we think will allow students to be successful. If they're curious, they're open-minded, they're globally minded, they are committed to their communities in some way. If we have seen that of you through your experiences in high school and through your application, then we think that you would be a good match for a university like ours. And of course, that will look different for every university, but just using NYU as an example, this is what we're looking for when I talk about student fit. Within the Common Application website, you will see a number of different requirements from students, and then also from the educators that support you as well. From students, we're going to need your Common Application, your Common App essay, maybe even an extra essay. It really varies by university as to what they require. Maybe they require 0 essays, maybe 2 or more. Maybe they require standardized test scores like the SAT, or maybe not. All of those questions and application deadlines can really vary between universities. And so as you're deciding what schools you want to apply to, it's important that you're staying organized to understand what each school is going to be expected of you. Of course, right? And then from your teachers, we'll need, potentially, depending on the school, a letter of recommendation from them in English. If they don't speak English, you'll have to have that letter translated. We'll need your high school transcript showing us all of the grades that you have received during high school, your school profile telling us a little bit of information about your school, potentially standardized test scores like the SAT if that's required by the universities that you're applying to, and also potentially an English language exam like TOEFL, IELTS, Duolingo, whatever might be easy for you to take or available to you. That's definitely something that you can expect a lot of universities to require. So with that brief overview of the components that are required in your application and what we are looking for when we review that application, I next want to really transition to the heart of this presentation, and that is the Common Application. Like Ms. Gladys introduced to you, this website is really amazing if you are applying to multiple schools in the United States that require this. Does anyone know, before I tell you the answer, how many universities use the Common Application website as the only way students can apply? What's your guess? It's a lot. What do you think? 100, 500? Yes, exactly. The Common Application, thank you for that, is used by over 1,000 universities in the United States and some other countries as well, as you'll be able to see when we go to the website. What makes it so awesome is, for example, when I was applying to universities in Pennsylvania, my home state, the 3 schools I decided to apply to all used this website as the only way that I could apply. And so I had to then create my Common App account, my one university application, and with the click of 3 buttons, I could send 3 university applications, even though it was just all of the same app. So it made my life a little bit easier. It saved me time, and it helped me to stay organized. And I think the best way to help you become Common App experts is to show it to you. And so that's what we're going to do. We together are going to pretend that we are applying to NYU using the Common App website. So here you can see it, commonapp.org. It's free for students to create an account on this website. If you're a younger student, you can create an account today, but it's not going to be open for applications until August of your final year of school. And that's when you can begin working on it and working towards those deadlines that usually fall in November, December, or January for the universities you're interested in. Before I actually log into my personal account, I want to show you how awesome of a resource this is. So here we can see right at the beginning is a first year application guide, if it loads. So as I scroll down, you'll be able to see a step-by-step explanation of how to use this website to apply to universities, including frequently asked questions and videos. And so if you forget everything I say today, rest assured you can always contact Ms. Gladys or myself, or you can just refer to this website. There are resources built into it to support you. And the other thing I want to bring your attention to is the first year essay prompts. We'll talk in great detail about the essay, but I want to show you this page now because even if you're a younger student who isn't necessarily applying to universities quite yet, from year to year, a little secret is that these 7 questions don't usually change. Maybe 1 or 2 of them will change next year, but you could begin thinking through these and considering now what you might want to write about for your university application essay, and can pretty much count on them being very similar, if not the same. However, if you are in your final year of school and you're applying to universities now, these questions are live. These are the questions that the Common Application is using for this application cycle. There are other resources as well, but what I want to do with you next is, like I said, use this website together to apply to NYU. So I've already created my own personal Common Application account. We can see my welcome message at the top. The first tip I have for you is when you create this Common Application account, you should first make sure you create a professional email address. What do I mean by that? Here I just have my initials in my email. I'll give you an example of a bad idea, and that is my own personal story. When I was in your shoes, my high school email address was pinkkiwi02@aol.com. I don't remember why it was that, but I do remember, because I was so embarrassed, my teacher telling me, oh, that doesn't look good. That is going to show up on top of your Common Application that you're sending to universities, and it's not super professional, so maybe change it to just your name. So that's what I did, following her advice. So I'm now logged into my own account, and before we actually build our university application, what I want to do is start with my research, decide what schools I want to apply to. So we can see here as they load that 1,024, that was a really good guess, universities use this website. In the United States, there are over 4,000 schools. It's a lot. So not all of them use the Common App, but around 25% of them do. And so if you're considering U.S. universities, it's quite likely that you will find yourself on this website. That is far too many to apply to, so let's filter it a little bit. You can see, let's just look at universities in Canada. A couple other countries use the Common App website as well, but Canada, for example, only has 4 schools using Common App. But for today's session, let's focus on schools in the United States, which now brings us to 967. Still a lot. There's a couple different types of filters that we could use. No fee for international applicants, start term, but let's just use the state filter and look at schools in California. How about New York, NYU, and my home state, Pennsylvania. That's still a lot of universities, but what I love about this website is that, one of many things, it's such a great place to start my research because now I have this filtered list and I can go through and get a snapshot of each of those 200 plus schools. It's showing me the contact details of admissions counselors like myself. That information is there for you to use. If you have questions, reach out to them. They are there to support you. I also can see links to their website, their social media channels, a virtual tour. They have rolling admissions, so I can start applying now. As an international student, it doesn't cost me anything to apply. And then you can see the requirements of that specific university's application. So let's say after further research, I go to the website. I'm looking at the size of the student body, scholarships available, distance from Panama, academic programs. There's a lot to consider. And after my research, if I decide, okay, yes, I would like to apply to Alvernia University in Pennsylvania, I can add that to my list. It's awesome because the university research and application process is really timely. It's going to take you quite some time, and as I log in and out of my Common Application account, not only is my application saved, of course, but so is my research. So here I have 4 schools that I've selected that I'm interested in, and I can go through and continue to personalize this as I narrow down the schools that ultimately I want to apply to, which is what we're going to do now. So I now have this list of 3 schools, my alma mater, Penn State, NYU, of course, and Bucknell University. And with you today, I am going to create my Common Application that we can then send to those 3 schools. 1 application, 3 universities. That's the beauty of the Common App. As we go through these sections, this is the information that all 3 of those universities will receive. A lot of it is pretty straightforward, but along the way, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to let me know, and we can, of course, review those sections. But you'll notice that a lot of it's pretty clear. Also, I want to draw your attention to the frequently asked questions box on the side pane here. That's on every page of the Common App, and so again, there are plenty of resources in place to support you. So let's begin with the profile section. Now, if you were paying attention, I introduced myself as Marcy, but here I've listed Martha, which is my first legal given name. The only person who calls me Martha is my grandmother, who I share a name with. But it's really important that we are providing our legal name here, because as documentation is being submitted on your behalf, like your grades, your test scores, all of those names need to match. So, legal name there. However, when universities contact me, I prefer that they call me Marcy. You'll notice throughout the Common Application that a lot of this is very US-centric. Starting off with name. First, middle, last. The structure of an American name, right? But if your name happens to be longer than the 3 provided boxes, you could just add them in chronological order, and you don't need to stress about it if your name is more than 3 long, if that makes sense. That's something in Mexico when I'm working with students, oftentimes their names are quite long, but as long as it's just in the right order, you will not run into any problems there. Have you used any other names? Yes, Marcy, like I told you, but not officially. So I'm going to answer no with that one and move on. I'm adding my birthday, coming up quite soon. Yes, I know, don't remind me. I'm not ready to be 30. I'm going to add a home address. However, universities don't really contact students by mail as often anymore. What's going to be of more importance is adding a phone number. Oftentimes for our applicants for NYU Abu Dhabi, I'm needing to call them and make sure that they are submitting all of the documents on time, letting them know what I'm missing, and so please make sure you're adding an accurate number where we can reach you. The demographics section is the first one that is going to be mostly optional. You'll notice there's not a little red asterisk star with most of these questions. When the Common Application indicates that a question is optional, we're very serious about that. It's not going to help your application if you choose to answer it, and it will not hurt your application if you don't answer it or if you can't answer it. So I've chose to leave all of those blank unless they were required of me. They're optional because it simply is information that's not necessary for an admissions decision to be made. So we don't need to stress about those. We'll just leave them blank. But do notice that this is another section where it's going to be very US-centric, asking if you were involved in the US military. Might seem a bit odd or intimidating even as an international student. However, please note that year after year, thousands of international students are using this website as well. But because most of these universities we're applying to are in the US, naturally this website is going to come across as US-centric, but don't let that intimidate you. Moving on to the languages section. It's important throughout your Common Application that all of the information that you are providing is truthful. Of course, right? For example, what is the number of languages you are proficient in? Now, even though I've been living in Mexico City for 2 years, unfortunately, I'm still not fluent in Spanish, and so I have to be honest and say just one. However, something I love about the Common App is that as we move through it, you'll see it will auto-populate and allow me to personalize this and add my responses. So now there are 3 blocks for me to fill in the languages that I am proficient in. But like I said, for me, sadly, at least for now, it's just one. So far, so good? Yeah, pretty straightforward, right? Not as scary as you thought? Geography and nationality. Where is your birth country? You have Mexico listed here. It's an optional question, but if you want, we can just change it to Panama. Now, this question is required. Select your citizenship status. Our options are U.S. citizen, dual citizen, permanent resident, refugee, DACA, or non-U.S. I'm going to say non-U.S. and add Panama. That question is required, and so is the following, but I want to remind you that right now, we are applying for university admissions. We are not applying for a visa yet. So we're going to answer these questions to the best of our ability, and we are not going to stress about them for now. Do you currently hold a valid U.S. visa? No, and this next question is optional, so if you want, you could leave it blank. But I'll answer it with you. Do you intend to apply for a new or different U.S. visa? Yes. What visa type? Also optional, but let's see. There's a lot of them. Now I imagine it would be an F1 student visa, but for now I'm going to say I do not know and move to the next section. Again, I'm not going to stress about this because I'm only applying for admissions, and it's important that I remind you right now that universities in the U.S. love to have international students. We love to welcome you to our campuses. And so in the event that you are admitted, then that university is going to support you and help you through the visa process. They have international student offices, of course, in place to do so. So for now, we'll answer those questions, and we'll worry about the visa when the time comes. The last question of this section is so important to me because I know firsthand that applying to universities can really be expensive. For example, we're taking the SAT and paying to send our scores to universities. I'm paying potentially for an English language exam. There are so many costs involved. In fact, even to send this Common Application to some universities, it can cost $20, $50, $80 US even. it adds up, right? So this question is asking me if that would present a financial burden to me and my family. Some universities that you'll find on the Common Application are free to apply to for international students, but for those that do have a cost for you to send this Common App, you're able to request a fee waiver, meaning that you would not pay. So for example, at NYU, it costs $80 to send this application to us. However, if you cannot pay that $80, what we are going to say is, yes, I meet one or more of the Common Application fee waiver eligibility criteria. Most of these are U.S. government programs that I've never even heard of and that obviously don't apply to international students. But with this last option, we are able to apply to universities like NYU who have financial support in place for free. This one says you can provide a supporting statement from a school official. Later in the Common Application, you're going to see when I add the name and email address of a teacher from my school. What happens is that if I say yes for this question, the Common Application will ask my teacher simply to verify that. And they will need to check a similar box to acknowledge that yes, Marcy does need financial support in order to apply to NYU, and then I as the student don't need to pay. So if that is your situation, never hesitate again to reach out to universities and ask them if that support is in place for you. And then I just had to sign my full formal name as my signature. And the last question is optional for US students, and so I'm going to ignore that and move on. Did you still have a question over there? Sure. So her question is, what type of visa are they asking about on the Common App? So most likely, as international students studying in the United States, you would be on a student visa. And so that's why they're asking this question. They just want to know if you already have a visa or not. But again, right now, we are only applying for admission. We're not applying for a visa. This doesn't affect the visa process for you at all. It only is for admissions. And if you say, no, I don't have a visa, that also is not going to impact your admissions.
There's a question from the Zoom. I want to loop in our stream audience from the interior of the country. So Alberto's asking, what is the level of English to study in Abu Dhabi?
Awesome. Thanks for the question, Alberto. So because NYU Abu Dhabi is still NYU, it's still a U.S. university, we would expect our students to be fluent in English, and we do require English language proficiency exam scores from something like Duolingo, TOEFL, IELTS, in order to assess that English level. Any other questions online?
Not for now.
All right. And actually, with that question, it brings to mind that even for the Duolingo exam, some universities like NYU Abu Dhabi have fee waivers. And so again, reach out to admissions officers in order to be more aware of that support in place for you. There's a question in the back, please.
In those exams, what are the scores you're asking?
Sure.
In that one, Abu Dhabi, what
Sure.
is the scores?
So for NYU Abu Dhabi, we don't have any minimum score requirements for the English language exams, for SAT. There's no kind of benchmark set in place there. However, if you look online, each of those English exams that we accept does have a recommended score range for competitive applicants that you can find.
Thank you.
But that's going to, again, look different for each university. All right, great questions, thank you. So moving to the next section, family. Why are we asking about your family? Because this is a holistic review of your application, and we just want to better understand where you're coming from. So it's going to ask me my parents' marital status. This is a required question. With whom do you live with? Lots of options for us to, again, personalize this application as much as you can. Do you have any children? An optional question. Then for each of my parents, most of these questions aren't required, but it's going to ask me, is my father living? What is his name? Scrolling through this quickly. If I want to add my father or my mother's email address and phone number, what will happen is the Common Application will keep them updated about my applications and the universities that I'm applying to. I talk to my parents on a daily basis. I don't need them more in my business than they already are, so I'll keep them updated on that, and I'll leave these optional questions blank. And then finally, I don't need to add his occupation, but I do need to add my father's education level. And for my father, you'll see I had to scroll through this list of options from none the whole way up to graduate school, like a PhD, a master's degree, a law degree. For my father, it was some university. He attended one university. And then I needed to add the name of that school. And it was the same as mine, so you can see I've selected it here. But he did not earn his degree. I answered the same questions for my mother, and then for my siblings, I simply needed to add their names. There. Still, it's straightforward, right? We're moving through it quick. The education section, however, is, I think, when it starts to get a little bit complicated. Starting with your current school. So let's go ahead and add, how about, I know we have some friends here from Brader. Let's see if we can find Colegio Brader. There it is. And so I can add that automatically. If, when you start to type the name of your school, it doesn't appear here, then you will just need to add it on your own. You'll have to add the name and the address of your school. Whoops. So there I have Brader. When did you start? August of 2020. Is this a boarding school? Do you live there? No. Will you graduate from this school? Yes. When will you graduate? June 2023. I know the academic year is different here, so you will add December 2022. The next question. Please indicate if any of these options will have affected your progression through or since secondary or high school. When we review your Common Application, we really want to have a solid understanding of your high school experience. So if for any reason you had to take time off, maybe you advanced a year based on academics, or maybe the opposite, you had to pause a year for whatever reason, we need to know that. If there was no change, you went straight through and had a normal timeline, then you can easily move on. However, maybe once you finish school, before you apply for university, you wanted to take a year off. You wanted to take a gap year. Whatever your situation may be, a box is then provided for you to explain why there was a change in your timeline, whatever that may have looked like for you. So, for example, due to COVID-19, I decided to take a gap year between high school and university, blah, blah, blah. This part is not being assessed. We just want more information. Similarly, did you attend more than one high school? If not, you can select 0 and move on. But if you did, we want to know the name of that school, so you'll have to add it here in the same way. And then all that we need to know about your experience at the second high school is the dates that you were there and why. What was the reason that you attended more than one school? So perhaps based on top academics, I was selected on scholarship to attend a prestigious school, so I transferred. Or maybe my father switched jobs and we had to move to a different city, and so I had to move schools. So it's just providing the reader of your application with more context, more understanding of your story. Yes, please. Oh, good question. I love that question. Thank you. Thank you. So the question was, okay, well, what happens if in first grade the student changed schools? I haven't mentioned this yet, but it's important that all of the information we are adding to our Common Application is only about high school. Help me out. How many years of high school do you have here in Panama? Some have 5, some have 6. It depends on the school. And tell me, how many years do you know or do you think they have in the United States? Exactly. There's a bit of a mismatch, right? That being said, we are expecting 6 years of information in your Common Application because we understand that here the system is different. So that means if you switch schools in first grade, that's irrelevant. We only need from high school. And that is going to be about that question. Have you changed schools? What were your grades? What activities were you involved in? All of that information is only coming from your high school experience. And some students during their high school experience have the opportunity to take university courses. If that doesn't apply to you, then you can move to the next one. But if it does, then all we need to know is the name of the university, what type of program was it isn't required, but perhaps it was dual enrollment or a summer class, and then the date, and that's it. Please.
Does online courses count?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh.
So if you had the chance to take online level university courses, then you could add that in this section.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah. So I know right now, especially through La Pandemia, it was really popular to be taking online courses in whatever subject, right? If that was through something like Coursera, for example, then I, as the student, would add that in my activities section. But if it was a licensed university, for example, what did I add here? Texas Tech, I think. So if you're taking online courses at Texas Tech, then that would go here in this section. If it's just classes online more casually, that you're not paying for, that you're not getting credits for at the university level, activities, but if it is university level, you can add the name of the school here. Any other questions before we move to the next section? Please.
Okay, just to be sure, I know she asked about Coursera, but so there's a thing in Coursera where there's actually like college courses, but it's like, for example, like the University of Amsterdam, like I did like a sociology course, and they do give credentials if you pay for like a diploma that you finished with all the points that were required, but I don't know if that counts still.
Yeah, definitely. I would add that if I was you.
Okay.
To this section.
Thank you.
All right. So the next section, I'm just going to warn you in advance, is very U.S.-centric. What do I mean by that? I mean that, again, the Common Application was designed for U.S. high schools, but with the understanding that not all students who are sending us applications are from U.S. systems. We understand that. And so when we review your application, we are not comparing your school to your school, even here in Panama City. We are reviewing your application based on what was available to you at your high school. We will learn about your school when we are reviewing your application in order to assess it accurately and fairly. Why do I say that? Because this next section might not apply to your school. So let's go ahead and take a look. The first question, the approximate size of your graduating class. Not how many students are in your school or in your math class, but how many students will finish with you in December. I suggest you work with a teacher on the questions in this section because they can provide you with more accurate information. So, for example, my teacher told me there are around 50 students that will graduate with me. Next question. Class rank reporting. Class rank meaning, based on academics at your school, are the students ranked 1 through 50? In the U.S., that's quite common. Outside of the U.S., it's not as common. Do you know, do any of your schools use a class rank? I'm not going to ask you your rank, don't worry, but only a couple hands come up in the room, and that doesn't surprise me. So if you do have class rank at your school, then your teacher can tell you, okay, yes, out of those 50 students, you, Marcy, are number, I don't think that would be 12, maybe you are number 19, based on grades, at the time of application, because I haven't graduated yet when I'm filling this out. So as of right now, I, based on my academics, am number 19 out of 50. Or maybe it is more of a percentage, and so my teacher can tell me that I am in the top 20% of my classmates. Maybe your school doesn't have that, and that's fine. We will move on to the next one. The next one, GPA scale reporting. Does anyone know what GPA stands for? Yeah, grade point average. Raise your hands again for me. Does your school use a GPA system? There's some uncertainty, but no one is really confident that yes, we use it. Again, in the United States, very common to use the GPA system, meaning that, okay, if I have an A in my class, that means I got a 4 out of 4. If I got a B in my class, that means I got a 3 out of 4. It depends on the scale that your school uses. Let's say, for example, it's quite common for a school to use a 4.0. 4.0 meaning perfect grades. I got A's in all of my classes. And at my school, it was weighted. So if I took a difficult class, that A was worth a 5. So I actually could get above a 4. I could get a 4.6 because I got a couple A's in more difficult classes. I'm explaining this just so you have a better understanding of what you're looking at, but it seems like none of your schools use this system, and so we're just going to leave it blank then and move on to the next section and not worry about it because, again, it's not required, and we understand oftentimes schools here in Panama don't use it. Any questions about that section? Okay, moving on. One thing that I imagine most universities you'll be applying to require is something called your transcript. Your transcript is going to show us all of the courses you've taken in high school and all of your grades. It's important that your school translates that to English. We need to assume that the person reading our application doesn't speak any Spanish, and so they need to have everything being submitted, your transcript, your essay, your course list, your letter of recommendation in English. Another reason why it's very important that you don't procrastinate this process, because sometimes that's going to add an extra step, right, to get all of that translated. So this section is asking me to add all of the courses that I am taking this academic year. Not my grades, just the course titles. The reason that we want this information is because maybe there's a delay in your school sending us your transcript, and ultimately when we do see your application in its completion, we'll have all of the classes that you've taken. We'll know these answers. But even though the teacher's giving it to us, we want you to tell us as well what classes you're taking this year. You can categorize them based on their subject. Add the course title, again in English. And then, I'm so sorry, and then the course level. Let me just mute this. I'm going to also add the course level, but if there's not one that makes sense for you at your school, then you can just say NA, not applicable. But you will notice there are a number of different types of course levels: advanced, accelerated, regular. So try to match that as best as you can to the level at your school. And I've added all of my classes that I am taking currently. The next section, before I move to it, is honors. Now I'll need your participation for this one. In the honors section, we're able to add up to 5 honors that we have been awarded in high school only based on academics. Each school has different types of honors for your academic achievements. Could you tell me some examples from your schools? You can just shout them out. What does your school have for academic honors? Please.
Cuadro de honor. Like it's like a mark.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
honors list.
Okay, great.
Like they give you what's this? They give you like a tie
Oh, wow, that's awesome. That's a perfect example.
to indicate that you are like above some grade, like
Great.
4.5, for example.
Good one.
That's the only honor I know.
That's a good example, though. Thank you for that. Did you have one behind him?
Well, in my school it's different because we graduate with 3 diplomas, with commerce, letters, and science. So in 9th grade, that will be freshman for us. So having the average of students graduating that year, they take the 3 best scores at the end of the year, and they award them like with a scholarship, so they can keep studying on the school or maybe change from one school to another. And that's the kind of award we have in ours.
Perfect
They
example.
take like the best 3 grades and they award them with a scholarship.
Awesome. Thank you for those two. And there are so many. Again, it depends on not only your school, but your country, too, of what might be available to you. This is really one of the first or only places that it explains that it should be the 9th grade or international equivalent. So again, here it's going to be those 6 years, not just 4 like in the US. But I'm going to go ahead and show you just a couple examples of awards or honors that I have seen students submit in this section, things like Dean's List, Honor Roll, Valedictorian for top academics, Class Prefect, or even Math Olympiad. The only information we're asking about each of these honors is the title, when it was awarded to you, and then the level. Was it just at your school? Was it internationally? Whatever that may have looked like, just answer accurately. In the next section, we're going to give Ms. Gladys some attention. Indicate the number of community programs or organizations that have provided you with free assistance in your application process. Any community-based organizations that have supported you for free. Hello, welcome to Education USA. You're in the right place. This question is asking all about that, and I'm so proud of you really for being here and for taking advantage of the opportunity to work with Ms. Gladys and to have support through this process. By answering yes, it's not going to hurt your application in any way. But most of these organizations that you see are US-based, but we know here in Panama City you have Education USA to support you. And then the final question in this section is just asking about your future plans. Your career interests, there's a whole list you can go through. Maybe you can't find it, like my example of DJ, or maybe you don't know, so you could say undecided. And then the second question here is just, what is the highest degree that you intend to earn? So after your 4-year bachelor's degree, will you go on for your master's, your PhD, whatever that might look like? Maybe you don't know yet. This question is not asking you, what are you going to major at? What career program do you want specifically at NYU Abu Dhabi? We are going to get to that section later when we answer that specific question for each of the 3 schools we are applying to, because they all have different degree titles available, right? But here it's asking you just in general, what is your future plan? And we can now move on to the testing section. Because of the pandemic, a lot of universities like NYU are now test optional. In the past, we were test flexible, and so we understood that we're receiving applications from all over the world. We can't expect all of these students to thrive on the SAT. So because of that, we said you could apply with a number of different types of exams based on what's available to you. Now, because of the pandemic, we are test optional. So of course you can still submit a number of different types of exams, but you don't have to. In fact, this past year and the year before, 50% of students who applied to the university applied test optional. They didn't send us SAT or any other exam scores. And the way that their academics were then assessed was just with their high school transcript. And through this, a lot of universities are learning that, of course, that's a good assessment of a student's academic capability. And so if you do choose to take the SAT and you do well, and you want to send it to a university that's test optional, well, of course, it will help your application. If you take the SAT and you don't do so well, it actually could hurt you. But because we don't require it, and so don't send it. Just send us those good grades on your transcript instead. If you do choose to send exam scores to the universities you're applying to, then this section will be important. Right here we are self-reporting scores. We're telling the university what exams we have already taken or what we will take in the future, along with our scores if we already have them. So I have added in my options here the SAT and the Duolingo. If at your school there is an exam that you need to take in order to graduate, then you could send us those scores as well. But again, it's not required of you. And as you can see, it has now added options for me to go ahead and input the date, the past date, or the upcoming, or both times that I will take the SAT, along with my scores. I did not get a perfect score on the SAT. Which is why, in addition to self-reporting here, we need to make sure that the exam scores we're sending to the university come from official examination boards. So I have to pay the college board that facilitates the SAT to send my scores to NYU if I choose to do so, because unfortunately, NYU can't just take my word for it that I got a perfect score. And then same thing for Duolingo. I will just let them know that I am going to be taking it in the future. So we know when we read your application that those scores are coming our way. The next section is my favorite section, the activities section. This is where finally you can personalize your application a little bit more and show us what you're passionate about, what makes you you. And if you remember from the beginning of the presentation, this section matters. It's important. We want to know what you're putting your time into outside of school. I met with some students earlier this week in an after-school program, and they said, I don't have anything to put here because in addition to the classes I'm taking, I'm going 2 hours every day to this after-school program to continue my studies. That's their activity, and it's a pretty good one, right? And now, because they've listed that, I understand why they didn't have time to be involved in other things. And so, even though this section allows me to add up to 10 activities, 10 isn't the magic number. For us, it's really quality over quantity here. What are you really passionate about? We want to see sustained involvement throughout your time in high school, because that's going to show us really what you have been putting your time into, what you're passionate about, rather than just joining 10 things in your final year of school. There's a question, yeah.
So do clubs and activities within the school count, right?
Sure. So there is a lot of things that we could use in this section, and it depends on you. They give us a list of examples here that you can see at the top. It could be a job, it could be an official school activity like music or a sport, or maybe there's something outside of school that you are involved in. Maybe it's community service, maybe it's a religious organization, a job. Maybe you are so busy taking care of your younger siblings that you don't have time to be involved in activities. That also counts. That's showing us things about you, and that's why this section is so important, because of course we care what you're involved in and we're excited to learn about your passions, but when we read that, we're learning, okay, they are responsible, they are hardworking, they are passionate about such and such activity. It's telling us more about you as a person. Which is really why I love this section. I love seeing what students are involved in and what they are excited about. So as you can see, I've added a number of different examples for us here. You're able to categorize them. There's a lot of different options. I've added my position within that organization, the name of the organization in English, please, and a description of the activity. You only have 150 characters to describe it. And if you can, a tip for this little box is to show us how you personally contributed to that organization. So for this one, for this example, I have increased sales at the family business. I also showed how much time I committed to that. For this one, what I want to show you is that I actually had 3 different positions within the math club. It didn't make sense to add that as 3 separate activities, but here I have shown my progression and my leadership opportunity that I had with the math club. Another tip, don't use acronyms. The reader of your application or of my application doesn't know that PMMC actually means Penn Manor High School, where I attended math club. Spell it out. So you can see this, and what I suggest you do is add the activity that is most impressive or most important to you first. Because just as if we are reading your resume, that's where our eyes are first drawn to. That's where the reader's attention is going to go right away. And so that is the suggestion, even from the Common Application. And ultimately, when you finish this section, and the others as well, I think it's important to preview it just to make sure that there are no typos. Everything is in English. It looks impressive. I've added similar activities together to keep it a bit neater, for example, basketball and soccer. And now I think it looks good. It's ready to go. But definitely make sure that you don't have typos, of course, in your essay that we'll look at soon, but also throughout your Common Application. Oftentimes, students forget to edit their full application, but it's super important that you do so. Any questions about the activities section before we move on? Please. Go ahead.
Should volunteer hours be confirmed? Do we need
No, it's not necessary.
Okay.
Her question was, should volunteering hours be confirmed in any way? You should be honest about those hours, but we aren't expecting those to be confirmed by the organization that you volunteered with. Really good question. And sometimes students will say, I don't know how to answer the question about how many hours I committed to that, because, for example, with the family store, let's say sometimes I work 3 hours a week, other times it's 15 hours a week, it just depends. Don't stress about it, just put an average, put your best estimate, and move on. We're not going to be calling your employer or the organization that you volunteered with.
Okay, so in this section, it's required every time that you confirm that you participate in a volunteering organization, it is required to specify the hours for every organization and with a confirmation, official confirmation from the organization.
So again, give your best guess for the hours that you have contributed to whatever that activity may be, but we aren't expecting that to be confirmed by anyone.
Okay, my question is that, for example, my school, it's mandatory in order to graduate. You need if you're a student, you need to go to a rural, like to countryside, for a month, like there without electricity or anything, and you need to like do stuff there. I don't know, help the kids, or build houses with all your classmates for a month. So, but that's mandatory in order to graduate. So I don't know if that counts.
I love it. That's so impressive. Definitely include anything like that. Even if it was required that you are completing these service hours with your school, you still did it. And it still is impressive. And we still want to know about it. And this is the section that you would be sharing that. That's awesome. Definitely include that. My opinion with this section is, when in doubt, just add it. If you're thinking, oh man, I took this psychology course through Coursera, and I put a lot of time into it, I'm not sure if it would go here or not, add it. Definitely. Just when in doubt, add it to this section. Another thing about this is sometimes you'll have, for example, Math Olympiad, and you were a champion in that, and so maybe it could go in the honors section or in the activities section. It's up to you. Just as long as you're sharing that information with us, that's all that matters. But of course, in the activities section, keep in mind you're just able to provide more of a description than in the honors section. Any other questions from online or in the room with the activities? All right, so now we're moving to our last section of the Common App component. The instructions for the writing, for the personal essay, are explaining to us that only 2 out of the 3 schools we are applying to require the personal essay, but if we want, we can include it anyway for the 3rd one, for Penn State. So I'm just, yes, I understand, I'll send it to them because I have to write it anyway, so I might as well share it with all 3. I have a lot of advice for you and a lot of PowerPoint slides about the essay, so we'll not really focus on it here in the Common App, just to show you that this is where you're going to select the question that you have decided to answer, and when it's ready, you will paste your essay in this box. And then the last 2 questions in the writing section are here. I love that they include these 2 questions because it really gives you the opportunity to share, again, more context, more of your story that you think we need to understand in order to fairly assess your application. The first question is specific to the pandemic. How did COVID-19 impact your health, your well-being, your safety, your family circumstances, future plans, education, access to technology? Now, of course, we all were impacted greatly by the pandemic, and so keep that in mind when you answer this section. We don't need you to necessarily explain that it was difficult to take online courses for 2 years. We get that, right? But if there's anything that you think was especially unique or that you really think should be explained, this is your place to do so. Maybe your activities were canceled, so there's a bit of a gap there. Again, we understand, and we will keep that in mind as we're reviewing your application, but just, I think, remind yourself that you're not alone in that. So don't get down on yourself or stressed about how the pandemic has disadvantaged you. And then the next one is just a bit of a broader question, but is similar. Do you wish to provide any details of circumstances or qualifications that were not reflected in the application? That could look really different for everyone in this room. If there's nothing, if you've already shared everything we need to know, then you can skip this question and just say no. This box is not the place to add another essay or an overflow of your activity section, but if there's anything else that you think we should probably know about you, this is where you can do so. So for example, I took the most difficult classes that my school offered, but I just didn't feel challenged academically. We saw all of your grades, but we didn't know that until you explained it to us here. In my second year of high school, I spent 2 months in the hospital, and I struggled to maintain my grades. Okay, we saw the dip in your transcript, now we understand why. And so if there's anything else that we should understand, you can feel free to add that in this section. And for this section, again, my advice is if you're in doubt, you don't know if it's okay to add it or not, just add it. If that's something you think even for a second that we should be aware of. And that, my friends, is the end of the Common Application. Some universities might require that you submit all of the courses that you've taken in this section, but luckily the 3 we've selected don't require that. What we finished right now is the application that we can send to all 3 of those universities on our list. They will all receive the same thing. But we need to come to the My Colleges tab to do 3 more last steps. Complete college-specific questions, invite our recommenders, and then finally submit. So let's go ahead and do that for NYU. You'll see again just that basic screenshot that we saw of all of those details at the beginning, but what we have to do is over here. And I'm actually going to start with the recommenders part, because this is really important that you have a teacher at your school who is supporting you through this process. I had to first just acknowledge that, yes, I know that my educator is going to add a letter of recommendation directly to the Common App, and I won't be able to read it. I waive my right to see it, and that's fine. Check, that's what the FERPA means. And now we'll answer your question.
Yeah, we have 3 questions, but I'm sorry, I got them on direct message, so just saw them. So we might, so Olivia's asking, if I skipped a year in high school and wasn't able to do my extracurricular in 9th grade because of the COVID-19 lockdown, how many years should I put my extracurricular? Last 2 years plus before high school?
Yeah, so for extracurriculars, just like everything else, we only want to see the time that you were involved in that during high school. And so let's say that I was a football player all of my life. I have high school for 6 years, but 2 of those years were pandemic years and I didn't play, so add 4 years to the Common App.
And then Sebastian is asking, is it a one-time application submission, or it can be updated or improved anytime for approaching new universities or opportunities? That's actually a good question.
That is a good question. So I am now building my Common App. Some university deadlines are going to be in November, some later in December or January. So even though it's one Common Application in this account, I can send it to multiple schools during this application cycle. So I can apply to one university in November, and if I was not admitted, my Common App is still here, and I could submit it later to schools in December or in January. However, let's say I apply to NYU for their November deadline and I'm not admitted, I can't apply again in January of the same cycle. You would have to wait a year. Any other questions from our online friends? All right, so back to the recommenders. I again wanted to start here because actually my teacher can be working on my Common Application requirements at the same time as I'm working on it. So once I add their name and their email address, for example, my teacher here, Mr. Daniel, received an email that says, okay, Mr. Daniel, Marcy, her needs all of these things from you. She needs you to acknowledge, yes, I understand she's applying early decision. Yes, I know she needs the fee waiver check. I will send information about our school, and I will send the letter of recommendation. And he has his own Common Application account as my teacher. So he can see my progress, and I can see his. And we are working at the same time in making sure that all of those requirements are submitted to the universities I'm interested in. And so again, I think it's important to do this part early, so you are giving those teachers time to submit that on your behalf, because I can invite him before I submit my application to NYU. As you can see, he's already working on it. So next, let's answer the university-specific questions. We're not going to go through all of these, but these questions in this section, there's a lot of them, are only about NYU. So I'm graduating this cycle. I want to be the class of 2027 graduating from NYU Abu Dhabi then. I'm going to apply early decision November 1st, indicating that NYU is my #1 choice, and if they accept me because I have applied early decision, I will withdraw all of my other university applications. Other questions are things like, which campus, Abu Dhabi or New York or Shanghai for NYU? Are you going to apply for scholarships? Do you want to live on campus? What do you want to major in? So those are the type of questions that you can expect in this section for each of the schools that you are applying to. And once you finish those questions, we can ultimately review and submit. However, since I didn't actually finish my application yet and it's a practice account, I can't quite hit go yet, but when it comes your time, this is where you will do so for all 3 of those schools that you are interested in. And that is the Common App. It's not as bad as you thought, right? We moved through that easily. And I think that it's really important that you start in advance, start looking at it now, create your account now, but don't be intimidated by this process, because if you give yourself time, it's really easy to be adding all of the information that we saw together today. So at this point, are there any questions about the Common Application before we talk more about the essay? Please.
About how many recommendation letters?
Oh, love that. Yeah, really good.
About how many recommendation letters should we add?
So as you can see here, we can invite a number of different individuals to submit letters on our behalf. For NYU, we used to require 2 letters of recommendation, and they could be from 2 teachers of the student's choice. But what we realized is that those 2 letters were oftentimes very similar about the student. And so this year is the first year, actually, that we are only requiring 1 letter of recommendation coming from a teacher of the student's choice. And that should be someone who really knows you well, and just like your own essay, it's going to be unique to you. Not just Marcy is a hardworking, responsible student who's really impressive and always on time to class. Okay, but like, what makes you stand out? What makes you different? And so if you have a teacher who really would be able to speak to that in your letter, that is what we recommend. That being said, you could send a 2nd or a 3rd or a 4th letter of recommendation. Of course, students do. But just keep in mind how many pages we're reading about each student. Our suggestion there is the optional 2nd, 3rd, 4th letters of recommendation should only come from someone who could tell us something different. Maybe it's a boss at work, maybe it's a coach who has a different perspective about you. And then, of course, that letter is welcome. But just keep that in mind. Any other questions? If you think of them, of course, we can jump back into the Common Application. Really awesome questions so far. Thank you for that. But at this point, I want to spend a little bit of time just talking about the Common App essay, because like I explained at the beginning, this is a really important part of the application process. A lot of the information that we see, your activities section, your transcript, it's going to kind of look quite similar. But what's special about the essay is that it's really your chance to introduce yourself, to show us something about your life that has made you unique, something that we didn't necessarily learn about you in the other parts of your application. I see a lot of you taking pictures of this slide. I definitely love that idea and suggest that you do so that as you go through that writing process, you can refer back to these tips that were actually put together by New York University's Writing Center for students as they go through this process. Again, this is a great way for us to assess the student fit, like we talked about earlier. So maybe through the story that you choose to tell in your essay, we're learning things about you, and as we read that, we're thinking, oh wow, this student would really fit right into our student body at NYU Abu Dhabi. And then the last thing is that it's a great writing sample. It's a chance for us to see where your writing level, where your English level is. With that in mind, do you think that it's okay for someone to edit the essay for you? I see some no, some yes. There's a fine line. We encourage you to have people help you edit the essay. Please have other people look at your essay. Ask them if it's a good story to tell, or maybe is there something better that you think would be a better example for me to share with the admissions committee. Ask them to review your spelling and your grammar to perfect it. But, like I said, there's a fine line. For example, when I was a student completing my Common Application, my English teacher helped me edit, and she found a lot of grammar mistakes, I hate to admit, that we were able to fix. And my father also reviewed my essay. And when he returned my essay to me, he completely rewrote it, or at least tried to. And I had to tell him, thank you, but no thank you, because I knew that I had lost my own story and my own voice in the edits that he was trying to make. And so keep that in mind, but definitely have people help you through the editing process. But the great part about the essay is that it's really your space. You have total control to be creative and to show off parts about you that you think set you apart. And that can really result in essays looking a number of different ways. For example, I've read an essay from a student in Jamaica about grandma's chicken soup. And I see some surprised faces. And her essay took the reader through all of the ingredients of the chicken soup as this metaphor. And as she was telling us and describing the importance of her family to her, and of her grandmother's importance in her life, the ingredients that she was describing were things that happened to her throughout her life that she was showing us turned her into this beautiful recipe that she has come up with today. Or another student from Mexico, his essay, he was accepted last year to NYU Abu Dhabi, was a poem. For me, I am not a creative person, I'm not an artistic person. I definitely could not write a poem as my university application essay, but for him it was so perfect, and it really showed off his personality and his skills and his passions through the poem about his life. And so really, this is your space, this is your time to shine. We suggest that the steps that you take are to first just look at those 7 different prompts or questions that I showed you earlier, and be open to all 7 of them. Think about, brainstorm how you might be able to respond to each of them. And as you further develop those ideas, I think it should become clear to you which of the 7 stories will be the strongest for you personally. But overall, think about, as you're writing, what do you want us to learn about you? And as we look at the prompts together shortly, you'll see that what we learn could be so many different things. It could be what you're passionate about, an obstacle you overcame, an achievement. There is no right or wrong answer for this essay. Remember that. But what do you want us to learn when we are reading this? Here's the instructions straight from the Common Application. In my opinion, there's only a couple rules for this essay. Number 1, you have to choose 1 out of the 7 questions. You can't write more than 1 essay. So respond to 1 out of the 7 questions. It has to be between 250 and 650 words. And I think the 3rd rule is that it needs to be unique. No other student in your school or in all of Panama or in the pile of applications that we are reading should be able to share something like what you wrote, because it's your own unique story. So really push yourself to be more and more unique, and to remember that. Could anyone else say the same thing? Because if so, it needs to be more personal. So here is the 7 different questions that we are using this year. And what I want to do with you, time permitting, please keep me on time, is go through all 7 of these questions together. Of course, feel free to take pictures of the slides as we go through it, but also remember these questions are online now. All you need to do is Google Common Application Prompts 2022, and you'll find the 7 questions that students who are applying this year to universities can choose from. So as we go through the slides, what you'll see at the top is the essay question. 1 of these 7. Followed by 3 excerpts, obviously not 3 full essays, but 3 sample ways that students have responded to this question. As we go through it, I'm going to need a lot of participation. I want us to act like we are an admissions committee. Would we want to accept this student? Now, in their defense, we only have a sentence or 2 to go off of, so let's not be too harsh. But I think this will give you a really solid idea of what we're reading, of how differently students can be responding to these. So to start off, would anyone like to volunteer to read this first prompt for us? Any volunteers just to read it? Yeah, please. Starting with some students and ending with your story.
Just read number 1 and then the 3 examples.
Nope, just end with your story. Just read the big part.
Some
Number 1.
students from there. Some students have a background, identity, interest, or talent that is so meaningful they believe their application would be incomplete without it. If this sounds like you, then please share your story.
Amazing, thank you. This is just the first prompt. And I don't know about you, but already there are so many ways that we could respond to this. We could talk about our background, our interests, our identities, our talents. So start to get those wheels turning and think about the ways that you might be able to respond to this as we look at a couple examples. We will pretend that this first writer is from Panama. So they say, I am of Panamanian nationality, which means I speak in this unique way, have these unique traditions, and eat these unique foods that I bet you've never heard of. Okay, again, it's just the first sentence, but do you think this student is off to a good start? No? Why not?
First of all, the start. It's like, for example, let's put that he wants to study computer science at Stanford University, for example. That's unnecessary. That doesn't add anything like to his personal identity. Second, it seems pretty arrogant. like yeah, I eat this kind of food. That doesn't make you special. That doesn't mean that you're gonna fit in a class with mostly Asians. mostly Asians. That's pretty unnecessary. For example, the second one, like, it's meaningful. Like it represents that you can fit into a class. But the first one, like,
does anyone? Thank you for that. Does anyone
anything.
agree or disagree that has a different perspective? Yeah, please, in the back.
I disagree. I think the second one is maybe worse than the first one because the second one is definitely a little bit arrogant. And you have already listed your academic reports and all of that. I don't think starting your essay that I excel in this class and I have won these awards says that much about you. Instead, I think the third one is the perfect one because it's definitely creative and it talks about your life specifically and how you have like different stages and it uses a creative way. I think the first one's okay. I don't think it's perfect, but I don't think it's that bad. The second one, I don't like.
Yep, I agree. And I love that we're comparing all three of these because I think it can help us get a better sense of what makes a strong essay and what maybe doesn't. And I agree with a number of the things that I heard. So let me just share my feedback going down through the three of these examples before we move on to the next prompt. With number one, any student in Panama could tell me what sentence number one tells me. Of course, you can write about your cultural heritage, your nationality, your background, and your identity. The question asks you to. But if you choose to do that, you need to take it to another step. You need to take it to the next level and make it even more personal than what this student has done, at least so far. The second one, spot on. For me, when I read that, first of all, we already know all of that information from their Common App, and second of all, I also get a little bit of an arrogant vibe from number two. That's a really important reason why others should help you edit your essay. For example, you can ask them, okay, this is what I'm thinking of submitting. What is the tone of my writing? Is it too arrogant? Is it too humble? Because this is your space to show off. Don't be afraid to show off. We want to know what makes you proud. But be careful, because I would agree with you that one just kind of gives me a sense of arrogance from the student. And the third one. What's interesting to me about the third one is that I'm sure a lot of us like music. That doesn't make us unique in any way. But do you think that this third response is off to a unique start? I do. Kind of. I'm captivated by this third one. I want to learn more about the student and keep reading. I want to know what is this jazz stage that they're going to tell me about. It's not always only about what you write, but how you write as well. Doesn't mean you need to write a poem or be so flowy like number three if that's not you. But certainly this student has done a good job of capturing my attention. Questions about the first one before we move to number two? Anyone want to volunteer to read the second prompt for us? I'm going to ask for each one, just a heads up. All right, I volunteer. The lessons we take from obstacles we encounter can be fundamental to later success. Recount a time when you faced a challenge, setback, or failure. How did it affect you, and what did you learn from the experience? This question is prompting us to respond in more of a narrative, a storytelling way. For my personal writing style, would be a bit easier for me. You'll see as we go through, some of these questions are a bit more analytical, they're asking for more of an analysis of an idea. But for me, this one, I think I probably would have selected to respond to, excuse me. Student number 1 says, I failed grade 11 math because I had a teacher who didn't know how to teach well. I want to study engineering and know I'll do better with a good teacher. I don't think we need to spend too much time discussing this student. Would you admit them to your university? No. They're blaming their teacher. I don't know what the rest of their essay says, but I don't know if they can recover from those first 2 sentences. Student number 2 says, as I started my final lap in the pool, the entire crowd was cheering, including every other swimmer, all of whom had finished long before me and were grabbing their towels. If I set any records that day, it only could have been for the slowest time. Interesting. But without my participation, my school could not have even qualified. What do we think? Do you like that response so far? Yeah, I think it's decent. It grabs my attention. One thing I want to highlight about this second response is if you are an athlete and you want to write about your sports in this essay, by all means, feel free to do so. We already know, for example, that you are part of the swimming team because we saw it in the activities section of your Common App. But perhaps it is so important to you that you also want to write about it. That's okay. There can be some overlap between your Common App information and the essay. That's not a strong rule, right? If you do choose to write about athletics, make sure you avoid the cliches, right? For example, dribble, dribble, swish, and then the buzzer went off and I won the championship winning. Okay, we've read a lot of essays like that. And so that would be an easy kind of trap to fall into because it's not as personalized. Of course, you can write about athletics, but make sure you're keeping it personal or unique like this student did. Also, as we review all of these sample responses, keep in mind, what are we learning about the student? For student number 1 here, we are learning that they maybe are immature, they don't take responsibility, and that they want to study engineering. Student number 2, my takeaway personally is that they are a team player, they're resilient, they still finished the race even though they must have been so embarrassed. I think they seem humble because they shared such an embarrassing story with us. So there's a lot of different things that we are going to learn from each of these responses. Again, there's no right way to answer any of these. It's up to you. All right, this one's short. Who wants to volunteer to read number 3 for us? Anybody? Anybody? Yeah, please. Thank you.
Reflect on a time when you challenged a belief or idea. What prompted your thinking? What was the outcome?
Awesome. Thank you so much. So like I was saying with number 2 is inspiring more of a narrative, a story. Number 3 is asking more of an analytical question, asking me to analyze a belief or idea that I have a problem with. These respond to a similar idea in very different ways. I'm curious as to what you think. Number 1 says, in my culture, a man aims for a good career and a woman should aim for a happy family. I don't think this is fair. Okay? Number 2, growing up, no one even spoke to me about engineering. It didn't seem like an option for a girl. By 10th grade, I had subscribed to 2 magazines, 5 YouTube channels, and my top Google results were how do you make and how to take apart. By 11th grade, I held our school's first Made by Girls meeting and had 20 elementary school girls bringing clocks to deconstruct. This year, our first meeting had 60 girls. Responding to somewhat similar ideas, any feedback on these 2? Do you like the first one? We only have 1 sentence to go off of, but could the first one be better? How could it be better? In my opinion, it could be better if the student brought their life into it a little bit more. I agree with them, but I want to know why they are so passionate about that they chose to write about it. Are they making a difference in any way in their community? We're not asking that they have changed their culture. That's not the expectation here. But within your school, within your family, is there anything that you are doing to make a difference with this idea that you have such an issue with. For example, student number 2. Student number 2 is making a difference with this topic that has really challenged them. Already from student number 2's common application, I knew they want to study engineering, and I knew they were involved in the Made by Girls Club. So this is a good example of where overlap is great. This student wanted to elaborate even further on information that I already knew from other parts of the application. And I think they did a great job of that and will be a leader in the field of engineering that it would be an honor to have at our university. Stop me along the way with any questions, but moving to number 4. Describe a problem you've solved or a problem you'd like to solve. It can be an intellectual challenge, a research query, an ethical dilemma, anything that is of personal importance no matter the scale. Explain its significance to you and what steps you took or could be taken to identify a solution. All right, so we have 3 responses to look at for number 4. Some of these prompts, some of the questions are quite long. Make sure that you're responding to the entire thing. Some of them contain more than one question within the question. Explain its significance to you. What steps did you take? Or did you possibly will take in the future? Student number 1 says, poverty is the world's number 1 problem. I would try to fix this problem by eliminating greed and creating equality. Any thoughts on that one? I'm loving your facial reactions to all of these. Because I agree every time. It's kind of like, okay, like, yes, poverty is a huge problem. We wish it wasn't. But with this first one, it's kind of like we call it a beauty pageant response. We want world peace and equality and to eliminate poverty. Okay, so do all of us. But again, the student needs to bring it to a deeper level to personalize it in some way. The second and the third do a better job of that. Number 2, my country sends many brilliant students abroad, but suffers severely from brain drain. I would like to start a global internship program that lets students know they don't need to sacrifice a good job to return home. Brain drain meaning that student from country A is accepted to a university in country B, and when they graduate, they don't go home. Their brain was drained because they accepted their first job in the country where they studied. And this student sees that as such an issue in their country that they chose to write their essay about it. Do you think this essay, so far at least, is a good response to prompt number 4? It's decent. Does it answer prompt number 4? I think so. They haven't already started the internship program. But that's okay because in the instructions for number 4 it says steps that you took or could be taken. So it still is just an idea, but that's okay because it is still answering the prompt accurately. Definitely it's unique, but I don't know. I give this one kind of like an average score. Like it passes, but it's not the most exciting essay I've ever read. And I would say the same thing is true for the third one. Last weekend, I spent 1 hour in the mall and then another full hour in the taxi line outside. The second hour inspired me to think about a career in urban planning. I will create a city where a family remembers their outing by the experience at their destination, not the experience in the taxi line. Now again, this essay can literally be about anything. I've said this before, but there's no right or wrong answer. But probably this student could have written something more exciting about their life, right? Than this issue that they had with waiting in line for a taxi. Definitely it's unique. I don't think that we'll read any other essays like that. But again, like number 2, for me, it's just not the most exciting of the supplements that we are looking at today. Is this helpful? It's giving you a little bit of a better idea of potential responses, that really all of you have a different story to tell and that there isn't a right or wrong answer. And I love that we are given the opportunity to respond to 7 completely different questions, because I think that really you could share anything. In fact, you'll see momentarily when we get to number 7, but question number 7 is, tell us anything. Let's look at number 5. This is actually one of my favorites. Number 5 says, does anyone want to read it? Yeah. Oh, please.
or others. Discuss an accomplishment, event, or realization that sparked a period of personal growth and a new understanding of yourself or others.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Again, this one is inspiring us to write about a narrative, to tell a story. Student number 1 responds by saying, "My mother left when I was 12. That was the year I mastered cooking an omelet, turning my little brother's tears into giggles, and most importantly, learning what was my fault and what was not." Super heavy topic to write about. My advice before we critique this specific essay, my advice if you choose to write about something like this, we say the 3 Ds, disease, divorce, or death. I hope that none of your lives have been impacted by those topics. But if they have, then you understand how transformative they can be, right? So if they have been so transformative that you really want to write about it, again, of course you can. There's no right or wrong here. This is your space. But we suggest that you only write about something so heavy and personal if it's really crucial for us to know about that event in order to understand who you are today. Does that make sense? But if it's really, you keep coming back to that idea that you really want to write about that and you think it's something that you should share, don't overthink it. Write it. Like, follow your heart on that one, because of course I'm sure that we would learn a lot about your growth in reading about that experience. And what I love about this sad response in number 1 is the growth, that they highlighted the growth. Because actually, using the same story, they could have responded to prompt number, I think it's number 2. They could have talked about how this was such a setback and a challenge in their life. And that would have been a perfect answer for number 2. However, I think that if they did, it would have taken more of a negative or tone to their writing. But instead, they're talking about it as an event that sparked a period of personal growth. And so I think that completely changes the story that they shared with us, even though it was from the same event. We only have 2 sentences for that response. And with their 650 words, they were able to tell us the story of this hard time in 7 words, the first 7 words. Not only did that capture my attention, but now for the rest of their essay, they're able to use that space to talk about their growth and their new understanding of themselves and the people around them. Other things I love about number 1 is instead of saying, "That was the year that I became independent and responsible," they gave us very specific examples. Do you see what I mean? Again, it's not just about what you write, but how you write it. What are we learning about you? We don't, no offense to this student, care that they know how to cook an omelet, but in sharing those 2 sentences, I am seeing that they are, I assume, self-aware, responsible, mature, and definitely ready for the level of independence that they will have at the university level because they are already seemingly so grown up. Compare that to the next one. When I turned 16, I got my driving license. No more relying on my parents, I was finally free. My friends and I went to the movies all the time and even to the beach on weekends. We had so much fun and I felt like an adult. Completely different, right? This student is telling us they feel like an adult, but my takeaway from that is that they are not ready for this level of independence and freedom that they're about to have at university. Another thing about the second response is in the United States, I don't know about here in Panama, but in the US, when students turn 16, they are all able to get their driver's license. So it's not necessarily a unique essay or a unique experience. Of course, they can still write about it, but if you choose to write about something as unique as that, just make sure that the story you choose to share is going to be more personalized than that student chose to. We only have 2 prompts left. Are there any questions before we move on to number 6?
Marcy. Beatriz is asking how long or how many words should a good essay have?
Oh, there is no answer to that. The essay should be between 250 and 650 words, but there's no like a good or not good essay within that. That's not that much space. If you choose to use all of it, great. If not, that's fine too. Don't stress about the word count. Focus on the story that you have to tell.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for the question. Any readers for number 6? Describe. Oh, go ahead.
Describe a topic, idea, or concept you find so engaging that it makes you lose all track of time. What does it captivate you? What or who do you turn to when you want to learn more?
Amazing, thank you. So again, this prompt is more analytical, like one of the other ones that we saw, where we're responding about an idea or a concept that is just so interesting that we want to share that with the admissions committee. Number 1 is talking about their love for writing. I love to write. When I need to take my mind off things, I use a pen and paper and get all my feelings down on that piece of paper. Once I start writing, I lose all track of time and sometimes don't know when to stop. What do you think? Do you like their response so far? Kind of. That's how I feel too. I'm like, well, it's decent, I guess. It's not that exciting, but it answers the prompt and it's telling me about this student's passion. So I guess it gets like a passing score. The second one, the second one, however, for me, I think is a lot more intriguing. The student says, the hours pass, day turns to night, and only my mother calling me down to dinner breaks the spell I am under. Without realizing it, I had spent yet another afternoon with my needle and thread. The small red and black triangles, diamonds, and squares are not just shapes to me, they are my family history laid out in cloth. I was only 9 when my grandmother taught me the art of embroidery, and as she showed me the stitches and patterns that were unique to our village, my fingers literally itched with excitement to start working. If this isn't your writing style, this kind of showy, like fluffy storytelling, don't try to write an essay like this, right? We want your voice, and so don't feel the pressure that it needs to be like that. Does that make sense? But I think that being said, this student did a really great job of telling us this story about something as simple as embroidery and made it intriguing. It made me, as the reader, want to know more about her or him, I don't think it specifies, and their family. But what did we learn about them through the essay so far? Maybe, well, definitely that they like embroidery, that they are close to their family. Maybe they're dedicated, they're patient, they're working on this embroidery project with grandma or mother. But I ask you that question because in all of these essay responses, what we learn is going to, again, look completely different. I share that again to remind you there's no right or wrong answer. You can talk about embroidering, you can talk about grandma's chicken soup or your athletics. You could talk about academics if you want to in your common application essay. You don't have to, but you could. There's not a right answer for this. It's just you sharing your own unique and personal story with us. And I'll end here with number 7. Share an essay on any topic of your choice. It can be one you've already written, one that responds to a different prompt, or one of your own design. And the tip that NYU shares with us for prompt number 7 is make sure not to write about something that is strictly academic or that doesn't tell us much about you. For example, even though you can tell us anything in this space, if the story that you want to share in your application essay doesn't really fit with prompts 1 through 6, but you know that's what you want to write about, of course you can add it here for number 7. But what this shouldn't be is the history paper that you got a perfect score on. We're not learning about you if you're submitting that as your essay, right? Or another example is that I saw a student's application who wanted to study chemistry. All of their activities were chemistry related. And then with essay number 7, they talked all about a physics experiment that they, or did I say chemistry? A chemistry experiment that they were working on. When I finished reading the essay, I learned a lot about that subject, but not as much about the student. And so if you choose number 7, just be careful because there's not additional kind of structure or guidance to that question. So just steer away from anything that is solely academic. And those are the 7 essay prompts. Any hesitations or questions about the essay writing process? All right. I think it's really, helpful to see examples and to get a better sense of how students are choosing to respond to these. Any questions from our online friends, Ms. Gladys?
No. I think we're good.
Okay.
I have a question, but it's not related to the essays, but to NYU. Do you know the number or the average of acceptance of the university?
Sure. So NYU has 3 different campuses, and we have different admissions committees for each campus. In New York, my colleagues in Shanghai at our campus there, and then my colleagues at NYU Abu Dhabi. But overall, the NYU acceptance rate average is 12%, and so it's quite competitive, of course, but as we review applications, again, it's the holistic review, looking at the essay, your grades, your activities, all of those things together that lead to those decisions. Good question. And I know we didn't talk much at all about NYU and NYU Abu Dhabi today, but just as long as you have registered for this event, then I will have your contact information and am able to share my support and resources about the university with you in the future. And so don't hesitate ever to reach out if there's anything that I can help you with. Okay, so if you have any questions, certainly we can return to those, but I do have a short video about NYU that I'll share with you now. We don't have to watch the whole thing, just out of respect for your time, but I'll show you just a couple minutes of NYU Abu Dhabi and why it's such a unique university experience.
Hello.
Welcome.
Welcome to NYU Abu Dhabi.
Hi, welcome to NYU Abu Dhabi. Today we'll be showing you our favorite spots around campus and in the city so that you can get an idea of what it's like to be a student here. So let's go.
We are here at the Central Plaza, which has the famous NYU Abu Dhabi palm trees. It's a place where we host a lot of events like National Day. A lot of students gather here. I like to personally come here and enjoy the sunset.
Hi, I'm Herbert. I'm standing in NYU Abu Dhabi's gymnasium located in the campus center. It houses a 200-meter running track and 3 full basketball courts in it.
Now we're at the Rockwell here in the gym, which also features state-of-the-art equipment and fantastic trainers. When I'm in the gym, I love to climb and play basketball.
Here we are on the 2nd floor of the campus center. Behind me is the marketplace, the secondary dining venue for students in NYU Abu Dhabi. Here, they can have not only great food, but also great conversations with people all around the world.
We're on the 3rd floor of the campus center, and this is the home of the beautiful NYU AD Library. The NYU AD Library houses more than 60,000 books, 5,000 DVDs, and over 100 computers for the students to use. We also have a special archive collection that features the first and early editions of the Shakespeare Global Collection, translated into many languages, along with outstanding Arabic literature. I personally love to study in this library, especially in the upper level group study rooms and the reading room, which provide me a great atmosphere to work.
We are here at the NYU AD 50-meter Olympic pool located in the campus center basement. This pool is really important to me because as both an Olympic swimmer and an NYU AD student, this is where I come to train before and after my classes. This is also the pool where I trained in preparation for the Rio Summer Olympics 2016.
Hi, my name is Maria, and right now we are at the Experimental Research Building at New York University, Abu Dhabi. So NYU AD has heavily invested its resources in research, and this is why we have exciting collaborative work happening. We have great funding opportunities as well as state-of-the-art technology. I'm a graduate student working in the Nemov Group, and we are very proud to be pioneers in the self-healing crystal field.
Here we are at the Arts Center, which is really a dream come true for any artist. It houses the Blue Hall, the Red Theater, and the Black Box, the last of which is a customizable space that can be rearranged according to the artist's needs. The Red Theater, which seats 700, and the Blue Hall, which has incredible acoustics. I myself performed a piano recital there, and honestly it was just such a beautiful experience to be able to share my music in such an incredible space. The Arts Center is also home to visual design studios, practice rooms, and the woodworking shop. In addition to this, we have artists in residence who come and run workshops and master classes to teach the students about their experiences. And this is really why it's such a special place to me and many of my colleagues.
That's a good place to stop. You can find that easily online if you want to see the rest of what makes NYU Abu Dhabi so unique. But if there aren't any other questions, I think we can conclude here, and again are just so appreciative of your time. But before we say goodbye, is there anything else on your mind?
There's a last question here regarding the essay, so I'm just going to read it. And then with that, we can say goodbye. Lucas is asking, she's trying to frame in her essay how her journey with juvenile arthritis made her feel in love with biomedicine. Would it be better to include more of her persistence in the sports by going through the sacrifice? Many of those words to focus more on wire research. Okay, I think this is a run-on sentence, but I think what she's trying to ask is, what should she focus on the research of the university or on her own experience?
I think regardless of what you want to write about, my best advice for any positions like that you find yourself in, where it's kind of like you have so much to say and only 650 words to say it, write it all out first. Tell the full story. Don't worry about the word count. And then as you go through the editing process, you can really narrow it down, if you even need to get it within those 650 words. And it will really become clear to you what details are the most important and where you can find that balance between ideas. And so I think just starting by putting it all out on paper is the best, and then just remembering to always bring it back to yourself and your own story. So it seems like with this example specifically, it would be better to focus on her and her personal growth, and mentioning the research that she's been able to do, but not focusing on that research.
That's great. So thank you.
Thank all of
Marcy.
you. Really, I'm just so proud of you for being here, and I think just give this process time, whether it's deciding what schools to apply to or the application itself. But just know that there are resources in place to support you along the way, and we're happy to help.
And now we have our office here at City of Knowledge. And many of you have come by and it was closed. Well, now we're open. We have our coordinator. I think she's inside in a meeting. Her name is Fernanda. We will be posting our office hours. And don't get scared. We have free resources to help you with the essays and with the common application, and we're going to be starting to organize cohorts. I'm going to need you to write your email and your contact information in the sheets up front. And then with that, I think everybody's ready to go. But thank you. ¿Les gustó la sesión? Sí. Bueno, ya saben, sigan construyendo su futuro y sigan llenando. Yo creo que les contestamos bastantes preguntas. Yo aprendí bastante. I learned a lot. Thank you, Marcy. Thank you, and bye, everybody in the interior of the country. From Chitré, Santiago, Chiriquí. Gracias a todo Panamá. Gracias a nuestros amigos que nos colaboraron y nos vemos. Muchas gracias. Saludos.